everybody. We're going to gather together this evening at 6 o'clock. I've got the top of the hour, and we'll do a roll call in just a second. And I'll open the meeting. I see all the planning commissioners, and Diane is logged on, but I don't see her. I think she got a phone call a moment ago. So let's give her a minute to join. Do you guys all have power all day today, or did you have a power outage like we did?
We had power.
Power? Okay, no power outages? Must have just been us. Oh, weird. Okay. I guess it was just us. Last night, it went out for a little while, and then at about 4 o'clock, it was out for maybe 15 minutes or so.
Big Lagoon had their power out.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah, we lost ours last night for, a couple minutes, and then it looked like earlier today around 4 or 5 o'clock for a couple minutes.
Oh, you did? Okay, so
Yeah.
we must be on the same system. So hopefully it'll hold out. I mean, the weather looks pretty good right now, so unless somebody hits a telephone pole, we should be good. And hopefully they won't for their sake. I'm just killing time. Diane. Oh, Diane.
Well,
Is that really loud?
Well, while we're waiting, I don't know how many of you have had a chance to meet Anton.
Hi.
No, we have not.
So
Hi.
he's on tonight, and he'll be doing the planning commission meetings from now on, is my understanding. So welcome, Anton. Thank you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, Anton. It's great to have you on the team.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give Diane another minute or two. Richard, you're on mute. I saw your lips move, though.
Me?
Leave that bag right here, and then I'll try to, I'll pick it up, because I'm gonna take some of it back down.
I realized when I was yelling, Diane, Diane, that I was probably blowing out all your eardrums. So apologies for that. I have my headset on, so. There she is. Oh, there she goes.
Can I ask a brief question?
Paula, is it related to the meeting? Because I'll have to officially open the meeting first. Is it? Go ahead and ask it, and then I may table it, but please.
I want to talk about what will be coming up within the next few months. And you had mentioned it at a planning commission meeting before about rate adjustments on the water bill. And
Okay.
I had some comments on that.
Okay, I'm gonna, if I may, I'm gonna ask you to hold that until we get to items from the floor, but that will be the fourth item tonight.
Okay.
And now that Commissioner Stockness has joined us, we have a full house. Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So this is the October 20th, 2021 City of Trinidad Planning Commission meeting. And I'd like to start with a roll call, if I might.
Commissioner Kelly,
I'm here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Stockness,
Present.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Here.
and Commissioner Heikkinen.
Here.
All right, excellent. So the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the August 18th, 2021 meeting. And I'll start first with planning commissioners. If you have any edits or changes.
Yeah, thank you.
You'd like to suggest. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. This is just a small nit, but I just wanted to correct something on page 5 of 8. In the second paragraph, midway through the paragraph, the sentence starts, the project does need a building. I believe that next word should be permit rather than project. So for just clarification, I think we need to make that change.
All right, thank you. Anything else on this, Richard?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? I see.
No, I think that's fine.
That looks fine, Diane, and
Yeah.
Aaron shaking his head, so, and I'm fine with them. So other than that change, let me just briefly open to public comments to see, are there any public comments on the agenda from, or excuse me, the meeting minutes from August 18th? Okay, I see no public comments on the meeting minutes at this time. So with that, I guess I'll move to approve the minutes from August 18th with the correction noted on page 5.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimously approved with that correction. And so we will go on to item number 3, which is approval of tonight's agenda. So let me start with the commissioners. Any changes to tonight's? Commissioner Stockness?
So are we missing a set of minutes?
Yes, we're
Uh,
still behind one. September 15th.
September.
Okay, because I was looking around, I thought, oh, did I misplace that? Because I've been out and about today and yesterday. Okay, thank you, Trevor.
All right, any changes then to tonight's agenda that the commissioners would like to suggest? All right, I see no nodding of affirmativeness, so we will, I don't think that's a word. So we will open to public comments. Are there any public comments on the proposed agenda for tonight's meeting? Okay, I see no public comments on the agenda, so we will proceed with our agenda for tonight. But first, we are now ready to have items from the floor. So this is the point in the meeting where members of the public can comment, generally up to about 3 minutes on items that are not on tonight's agenda. And so, Ms. Levine, I'll start with you.
This is in reference to setting the costs of water for the community. And going back 30 years, I used to pay twice as much as city residents. And then over a period of 30 years, the city has been making incremental adjustments in the right direction. Currently, I spend about 25% more plus 20% differential on consumption charges. So the point I'd like to make is I could not find any rationale for the discrepancy in the charges between soy residents and city residents. There are some municipalities that charge higher rates for out-of-city residents, but they generally provide services to out-of-city residents. So that's factored in since you're not collecting taxes from me. But from my perspective, you use the county roads that I finance. You use the library, which is a county library. The fire department is CAL FIRE and a volunteer fire department. The point being is it seems unjust to pay a different rate. Plus, if you equalize the rate, if you brought the rate up that city residents are paying now to what soy residents are paying, I think you will find that you're actually bringing in more money. So I strongly suggest that you keep our rates the same, the soy residents, and bring the city residents up to what we are paying. It's a simple solution to the issue.
Thank you.
And I would, years ago, when this had come up at a city council, I asked Chiwi why we were paying a higher rate. And the answer he gave me was because we can. The question being, why does the city charge more to soy residents? And the answer was, because we can. And this, I don't think that's a good enough answer. I think I've made my case, and to be continued when the issue comes up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And because it's not on tonight's agenda and pursuant to the Brown Act, we will not be able to comment at length. I don't know, Trevor, if you wanted to give a short response to that, or we can also, I could take this to the Water Advisory Committee to review water rates one more time, because I know we've talked about it in the past at the Planning Commission meetings. Should we just?
Yeah, although the Planning Commission doesn't have any say-so in setting rates, so I would suggest, that's really a city council discussion. But California does have strict requirements for how those rates are set and how they're documented. The city can't make money off of them. They have to be based on the actual costs of providing the services. My understanding would be that, the city does that the services outside city limits, they're not paying taxes. And so that might justify a higher rate. Paula brings up some good points about that. And so I think the city under the California law, Prop 218 and others would have to justify that. It might be that the services are more spread out there. And so there's more line to maintain per person. So that might be one reason that it costs more out there. But that's really an issue for the city council to study and decide on.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the response. And we'll table that for now then from a planning commission perspective. All right, other public comments on items, again, that are not on tonight's agenda? Paula, your hand is still up, but
Oh,
no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have something else. Okay.
No.
All right. I don't see any other public comments, so I'm going to go ahead and move us to our first agenda item for tonight, which is the Cole 2021-08 after the fact use permit and coastal development permit to remove 8 redwood trees greater than 12-inch DBH from the property to provide more light and defensible space around the residents, and that's the residents at 117 Berry Road. And so, Trevor, I think the best thing would be to start with one of your wonderful staff reports.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a pretty straightforward project, but it is an after the fact permit. So the trees were cut earlier in the spring. The city was made aware of it through the neighbor. The property owner was informed that a permit is required to remove large trees. So it was 8 trees, but at the ground level, it's just four stumps. But all 8 trees, I guess, were over 12 inches DBH. So there, once the applicant was informed that he needed a permit, there was some correspondence with staff. He submitted an application. And then did some research on his own and found some, provisions in the ordinances that kind of seem like they're conflicting, and was surprised at the cost of processing a permit. And so withdrew the application. I sent another letter. The city is trying to be a little bit more proactive in terms of enforcement. So, I've sent out probably more letters this year than I have before, which is probably a good thing. And so the applicant did submit an application. You might have noticed in his letter, he said he just submitted the $500 instead of the $750 deposit. But he did submit the remaining $250 deposit, so I could accept the application, go ahead and process it. I think, so I'm sure there'll be a discussion about the amount of the fine. So for after the fact permits, Planning Commission policy is to double the permit fees. But that is, can be considered on a case-by-case basis. There are some additional costs for this project due to the enforcement aspects. And so one thing to consider might be so the permit's already going to cost more because of that. And maybe, the doubling the permit fee excludes those costs and just includes the costs associated with the permit or something like that. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. Commissioner Hopkins does own property within 200 feet of this parcel, so he would have received a notice for it. So that is anything within 500 feet is a presumed financial conflict of interest. It only has to be 1 penny either way, but because Tom's property is across the creek, everything's forested, I assume he can't see this property. It's not on the same street. It's not likely to affect his property values one way or the other, or other financial interest, but that should be something he should address specifically. In terms of zoning ordinance, so the property is in the SR, suburban residential zone. In that zone, a use permit is required for removal of trees more than 12 inches. It's also a coastal development issue. The definition of development includes a major vegetation removal, although that's not defined in the Coastal Act or the regulations. 12 inches DBH is pretty standard, as well as 500 square feet of area if it's smaller vegetation. So that's what we use for coastal development permits. The one thing that the applicant did bring up is that in our views and vegetation ordinance, there is a definition of vegetation removal that includes removing stumps, roots, everything, which did not occur in this case. And I could see that as being confusing. However, that ordinance is not certified as part of the local coastal program, and it also only applies to the views and vegetation ordinance. So it doesn't apply to vegetation removal in general. I think it's pretty clear that the trees were removed, even though the roots weren't removed. But it might be worth revisiting that definition and see why that's in there, because I do see how that could be misleading, confusing. Let's see. So the zoning regulations in terms of building setbacks, heights aren't applicable in this case. Views are not likely to be impacted by this project. Utilities, those sorts of things are not going to be impacted. And then often it's actually recommended that the trunks and the roots are not removed in order to limit soil disturbance. And so that's the case with this project and has been included as a condition of approval. It's not in an area of slope that's designated as unstable or questionably stable, so no geologic issues are there. The sewage disposal system. So I don't have any information on the septic system for this property. It looks like the property was transferred in 2018, so should have been reviewed under the city's OWTS management program. It got overlooked. And so usually as part of any development applications, we make sure that the OWTS is in compliance with the city's management program. So that's been included as a condition of approval. That within 6 months they have to submit an application and an inspection report for that system. It looks like it was installed prior to when the city annexed that area, so I don't have any files for that property. The use permit findings are, as we've discussed before, aren't really applicable to vegetation removal. But they have been written in there in a manner to allow approval. But if the planning commission feels differently or the public submits information that conflicts with these findings, they should be reworded accordingly. Staff recommendation is for approval of the project, but you have options to continue the project to get more information, or deny the project if you feel that conditions that the findings can't be made. Since the work has already been done, trees removed, that couldn't just leave it. I guess it would require replanting or something like that, although the trees are already resprouting. Conditions of approval, reimbursing the costs, not disturbing any soil to remove the stumps. The fees are doubled related to the processing of the permit. Fee only is number 3, and then submitting the application for the OWTS operating permit is number 4. And that's it. There's a site plan that shows where the trees were removed. The property is still heavily vegetated. So if you drive by it, it's not real obvious that any trees were removed.
All right, thank you. I have a few questions, but I wanted to first go to Commissioner Hopkins. Commissioner Hopkins, what are your thoughts about participating in this versus recusal?
I do not know Mr. Cole. He's across the creek. I don't see the property. My daughter does know him, I understand, but it's a small town and everybody knows everybody in some way. So either way, I don't. If you as commissioner want me to step out, I will gladly do that. But I think I can be fair and impartial. But it's up to you all.
All right, I think I'm fine with that. Does anybody have any objections? Commissioner Stockman.
Okay, let me see. Tom, did you go look at the property?
No, I did not.
Okay, yeah, I don't really have any objection either.
All right, let's go ahead and proceed. And I think given the location, even though you're within that 500 feet, because you can't visibly see the property, we should be okay. So Trevor, one of the questions I had, and then I need to disclose a conversation I had about this today. One of the questions I had was the overall cost to the applicant now. Am I correct that it's around $750, and with our after the fact doubling it would be, I think maybe that was from the applicant's letter, 1,500, or is it?
That's right. I said I'd have an accounting for you, and I apologize. I forgot to do that. That was before last week. It was right around, it was like $730 or something like that. And so last week with the packet and the staff report and the notices, I probably spent at least another 3 hours. So let's maybe add 400 to that. And then there's this meeting time. So we're probably getting up to somewhere near, $1,200-1,300. Some of that is, writing the letter and corresponding with the applicant, and so isn't necessarily part of the permit cost. So that could maybe be excluded from doubling the fee. I don't know how, because that's already sort of an extra cost. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get an idea of what we were talking about, and then doubling the fee when we talked about that for after the fact. Was it I don't know if we ever clarified, was it doubling the application fee or doubling the application plus hours?
I believe we did talk about that, and it was doubling the actual costs, and that's what we've
Okay.
done for the couple others that
Okay.
we processed.
And just for clarification for the commissioners and I, does the planning commission have the, do we, at this point, I don't know, once we've made that decision, I'm not articulating this question. Can we change that? So can we make exceptions? I'm thinking not, because the city council applies our rules, but I thought I'd check.
What do you mean make a change? Like,
Well,
right now, tonight?
Let's say that the commissioner said, we don't want to charge double the fee for this after the fact permit. Is that even an option?
Yeah, I believe so. So I think, so I included the policy in the packet for you. And so.
Item 4 on the procedures kind of addresses that, Trevor.
Yeah, so so it's unless the planning commission determines there are extenuating circumstances. So I think that leaves you guys leeway to determine whatever is appropriate, considering maybe there was some confusion with the ordinance language. That could be an extenuating circumstance. And this is just a policy. This isn't set by the city council. What I was talking about with the fees is, so there's the actual cost to the city of my time to, write letters, part of the enforcement, as well as to process the permit. And the planning commission doesn't have the authority to waive that. So the $750 deposit is just a deposit. It usually does not cover the full cost of processing an application. The applicant will be responsible for covering all of the actual costs to the city. So that's the planning commission doesn't have authority to change that. But what you do have authority to change is the doubling of the fee, and you can adjust that however you see fit. Your decision on that would be appealable to the city council. So if the applicant wants to appeal the fine, they could do so. And then beyond that, they could go to the city council and request, some of the costs be waived. I don't think that they're gonna get far with that, but they could do that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not suggesting that one way or the other at this point of the conversation. I just wanted that because I thought I had read that was within our domain. And I just wanted to quickly disclose that today I called the CAL FIRE resource management team just to understand a little bit better about our wildfire zones in Trinidad. It was unclear to me what is really being suggested, and it may just be my own ignorance, but by CAL FIRE in terms of defensible space around homes, et cetera. So I just wanted to disclose that I had a brief conversation with him, and one of the things we went through was whether or not Trinidad is a moderate, high, or very high wildfire risk zone. And if you look at the county maps, you'll see that if you go online and look at the CAL FIRE county maps, you'll see that Trinidad sort of whited out as a municipal area and under municipal jurisdiction. But if you go to the database and you search the addresses within Trinidad, you'll see that we're actually listed at high risk. So whether that's right or wrong, and that was one of the reasons I called CAL FIRE, was to understand where that data is coming from. Whether it's right or wrong, it is the current sort of designation. So it's just something to kind of have in our hip pocket. So as I read through this, and I want to open up to the commissioner's questions, and then, by the way, I noticed the applicant is online as well, so we'll give the applicant a chance to respond before we finalize our decision. I just wanted to say that to me, there's kind of two facets to this project. One is the project that's before us and determining, our thoughts on it. But there's also kind of the broader question of, have we made it clear to people, what's involved in tree removal? Is it a clear process? Is there a way we can do a little bit more to make it to make it easy for people to understand whether or not they need a permit and where to go to get that permit. So I think that may be a separate discussion. I'm not sure I want to keep the applicant for my, kind of dialogue about that. But anyway, so that's, I think that's all I wanted prelim that I had. So let me open it up to you guys for questions or comments. Commissioner Stockness, I see your hand first.
So I'm a little confused because I didn't know after the fact doubling the permit had to do with landscape. I thought it had to do with structures and building new properties. And I've been here, I keep telling you, 45 years, and we have gotten some of the trees out with the storm water project, and that was good because now there are 2 or 3 more of those cherry trees that have to come out because they are invading people's spaces. So my concern is because we are going into climate change and going into defensible space around properties here and in our beautiful Trinidad, West Haven area, things are really out of hand. The trees here are way out of whack. They're way out of height. And I would like to look at that design element and the ordinance. I got a copy of the ordinance today. I didn't get to go through it heavily because I had a doctor's in Eureka, but we need to definitely look at that ordinance and talk with the city council because what's happening in our environment needs to be lowered. And now I'm talking about trees, I'm talking about bushes because views are obstructed and it's all over. And PG&E wants us to trim our trees and people don't do it. They don't prune. We haven't had a lot of pruning in town. So I think, what this Tristan Cole is trying to do by getting, a defensible space, I respect that. And I think it's kind of tricky with all the requirements for him. And if he didn't know and it's not on the website, it's maybe we don't double it. Maybe we do an exception and, rewrite our design review elements so that we can be clear to the public. And okay, so I have one more question. Those administrative permits, is that you giving those or is that Gabe, Trevor?
Well, we don't have such a thing yet.
Okay.
But I am proposing that, and something like this might fall under an administrative permit in the future.
Okay.
But we don't have that yet.
Okay. So anyway, my feeling is I've been on this commission for years, and I just thought that it was building structures and not the landscape, even though I know the landscape's in there, but it's like, little bushes, drip systems, and et cetera. Okay, so I'm done.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Johnson, Heikkinen, or Hopkins? Any comments? Commissioner Johnson has his hand up.
Thank you. So just a reminder, Diane, remember this came up several years ago with Dorothy on Ocean Avenue, got very upset because she had to spend a great deal of money to cut down one tree. So this is an ongoing problem that the city has. I am totally distressed that we, after multiple times, haven't gotten our act together to solve this problem of communicating to citizens, residents of the city, what the requirements are, for getting permits. And it's again, this is another example where I believe that the property owner probably started off with all the best intentions and ran into a brick wall when it came to the bureaucracy of the city with permits. But let me digress for just 1 second. I did go to the property yesterday just to look at the trees, just as an ex parte disclosure. I wasn't on the property, but I drove by. I happened to live back in that area several years ago, so I go up there occasionally. So, Trevor, I am very concerned that after all this time with the OWTS ordinance in place, that we missed a septic system. So then that begs the question, how many others out there have we missed? And if nothing else, this should raise the level of concern that there may be others out there that we have missed. I'd like to think this is a one-time only thing, but I just want to make absolutely certain. So that's a kind of another issue, but it is a little disturbing that we don't have our arms around the total number of septic systems that fall under the OWTS ordinance. So in essentially, I have no problem with approving the after the fact permit. I mean, I think the property owner has all the right reasons why he wanted to remove the trees. I think that he understands the requirements now for permitting. I'm more concerned about our policies. And the after the fact permit policy, as I've read it several times today, to use the expression, you could drive a truck through it. And I am concerned because item 4 says, unless the Planning Commission determines that there were extenuating circumstances, after the fact approvals will generally be conditioned on the applicant paying double the permit cost. I have no idea what extenuating circumstances mean. And we go to great length on looking at design reviews and use permits and develop criteria for which we use to make decisions on these issues. And we say extenuating circumstances, and I have absolutely no idea what that means. So I would recommend that at some point that we should circle back and really look at this policy and make it much more robust than it is now. I appreciate what it's intended to do, and I think it's been effective in the past, but I think at the same time, it does need work to make it more definitive and to give us a little bit more capability to make a decision on whether or not we should waive
I'm able to change my.
Waive the.
You can do that if you log on from the browser, like it said. But
Are you muted?
Mm-hmm.
I think you're off mute. Not sure who that was. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I have some similar comments, I think, in a moment. But Tom, I apologize. I think you might have had your hand up before and it was off camera. Please go ahead.
Oh, that's no problem. I love listening to Richard. And he says a lot of things that I agree with. And so does Diane. But I think what jumps out at me, and it's going to be what we talk about later on, is basically solar gain and what are your rights to solar gain? And for me, and then fire also. So anyway, I've no problem approving this. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Heikkinen.
This question maybe for Trevor. The section 8, I'm having some trouble with my email and my technology here. The view and vegetation, the way I was reading that when I was reviewing is that really seems to be designed and intended for coastal view related issues. And there's a map that's not on the city website that I wasn't able to get it's been sent to me, but my email is fighting me. Is this property even within that area depicted on the map? So section 8 doesn't even, 8.16 doesn't even apply here, right? As far as the definition of removal, and I know that was a kind of a technicality that was brought to bear about some confusion. I just wanted to make that point. But the after effect, I don't have a problem with that. I appreciate the solar gain that Tom just mentioned. The fire, every little bit helps. The reality, for given my background in my profession, with the stands of trees that we have around here, 4 trees or 8 trees is, sadly negligible when a large event comes through. But every little bit can help, and you never know what little factors can do that. But that was just kind of my quick things. And then I agree there's a whole separate discussion that I'd love for us to have on, what does or doesn't apply, and how we can kind of better tighten that up. But I feel like that's great discussion, but not what Mr. Cole's waiting to hear us talk about.
Yeah, that's exactly what, you guys are reinforcing what I was trying to say at the beginning, and was not being super articulate, but I feel like, I guess, first of all, that I apologize to Mr. Cole for the confusion. I do think that the Planning Commission can work with city staff to clean up some of the communication. So I noticed, for example, Eureka has an FAQ on their website, and if you search on tree removal, you just do a Google search, Humboldt County tree removal, it'll pop up with the FAQ and say, if the tree is such and such width, you're likely to need a permit, please contact, and it's that simple. It's like, please contact so-and-so. And so there may be some things like that. And Trevor, I'll send that to you. And, we can discuss, there may be some short-term things we can do with what we have today, just to make it a little simpler for folks. I agree with Commissioner Hankinen on the fact that this section 8.3, whatever it was, it is actually related to view shed. And it is kind of an interesting point, because maybe what happens is, when we think about our ordinances, they're under a certain category. We may need to actually say within, for example, this like removal, we may need to say, for view shed, this is the definition of removal. I will tell you that the CAL FIRE gentleman suggested that we use the same definitions that the county and CAL FIRE use, just for simplicity, because it helps them, the citizens, they're seeing the same thing. The other thing I wanted to mention that CAL FIRE mentioned to me was that it is, in many cases, a good idea to remove trees for defensible fire space. It's sometimes good to have someone come out, an expert, to give you advice on both the vertical and horizontal clearing of brush and debris. And he also said that it was not a great idea from a fire perspective to leave the trees, once you cut them down, to leave it on the property. So disposing of it actually on the property creates more fire hazard rather than less. So I'm just passing that along. I had thought about making it a condition to say that the debris needed to be removed, but I'm not really at that stage. I think I'm agreeing with the rest of you. I could probably see my way clear to finding the extenuating circumstances in this case. And those extenuating circumstances in this case, I think, would be confusion about section 8.16.050. That, the definition of tree removal maybe wasn't as clear as it could have been. Anyway, so that's my 2 cents. Maybe at this point, we've all said a few things. Maybe I'll ask if Mr. Cole wants to take a couple minutes and give us his thoughts. Otherwise, hello. Thank you for listening to our dialogue. And I thought maybe you wanted to say a few words, so you're welcome to do so.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate your guys' discussion. I think, actually, before we get into the tree discussion, I just wanted to comment real quick on the septic, wastewater permitting, et cetera. when we purchased the house in 2018, we did have a septic inspection from Steve's, and they were like, I guess the septic system was not up to Trinidad's code, which I'm not familiar with, but surely they are. And we had them bring it up to code, but I didn't realize that something had to be submitted to the city, and they didn't inform me of that either. So I guess if that needs to be submitted, surely I can provide that. Anyways, so then regarding the trees, yeah, so the definition of removal in the views and vegetation zone, like I realized that it does say in there that, you know, that piece of code only applies to the view and vegetation zone, which, yeah, I'm not part of. But I guess like to me, like a definition of vegetation removal, like surely can't be all that different from one place to another, was sort of my take on it. Like, even though the definition is only provided there's no other definition certainly provided for removal. And like, so I don't know, it's, you know, it's not like a piece of code that is controlling me per se, but it's just a definition, I guess, is what I would say. And I guess definitions can be different in different parts of the code, but yeah, that is confusing. And obviously there is some amount of, well, I guess how the municipal code interacts with the Coastal Commission's jurisdiction is sort of like definitely something that I'm not sharp on, but, and I realize that comes into play here as well. And so that maybe could be somewhat conflicting with the view and vegetation definition of removal that's given there. But that's sort of maybe a different discussion. And then with regard to the defensible space argument, I mean, like, I guess it's my understanding that CAL FIRE has grayed out the city of Trinidad because all municipalities are sort of you know, under their own jurisdiction in terms of fire protection. But of course, our municipality is contracted with CAL FIRE to provide firefighting services. And so it sort of is, you know, under their, at least of their concern, I would say. And I think that this, I mean, particularly the cost of this, I mean, the cost of this permit is somewhat, doesn't encourage people to create defensible space at their house. And I guess to respond to what Aaron had to say about, you know, whatever, 4 or 8 trees doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean, I guess to be clear, I did actually initially wanted to take more trees down, but then stopped because I was made aware that I needed a permit to do this. And then now I'm just gonna prune those trees instead. But I mean, the other important thing about defensible space is that, I mean, most of my yard is forested, but I was trying to sort of break the existing trees on my property away from the rest of the forest that's down the hill, because you know, part of having defensible space is like beyond 100 feet, it's sort of wildland, but within 100 feet, you want to have, if you have trees, they should be spaced out. I mean, this is all available on the CAL FIRE website, but they should be spaced out. So that way, if you have a crown fire coming up the hill, out of the creek or down the hill, it hits a fire break, and it's not going to just crown fire right into all the trees in your yard and then throw embers onto your house.
Right.
And I guess what I'm getting at here is like this permitting process doesn't really encourage people to create that kind of defensible space within the city limits. And there's a lot of homes. I mean, pretty much everyone on my street is at the wildland urban interface. Everyone who backs up to Mill Creek and everyone out Himalaya is backing up to forest land. I think that it would be responsible to sort of encourage people to at least, think about defensible space. Outside of the city limits, the state requires landowners to have defensible space. And if you don't have it, you can actually be cited for that. I don't think they're citing people around here, but in other parts of the state, they are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess, and I actually was just reading before this meeting, if you live in a high or extremely high zone in California, you have to, and you want to sell your house as of July 1st, 2021, you have to provide a certificate of compliance of defensible space in order to sell your home. And so I think it's something that the city should at least be encouraging of within the city limits. And I guess my sort of final point was, so I reached out to the city of Arcata because I knew that you also needed a permit to remove trees there, and asked them about the cost of that. And for small projects such as this, they don't, and I don't know how, I mentioned this to Trevor, and I'm not sure how this fits in with the coastal zone for them as well, but the city, someone in the planning department there gave me a quote of $230. Basically, you say you want to cut down a few trees, they send out a technician to go look at it to make sure there's not any birds nesting in it, and then you go to work, and there isn't the public hearing process, which adds a considerable cost to the permit. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a comparison, and to sort of highlight that I mean, I guess Trevor said this is going to cost at least $1,200, and I think that's kind of a lot.
Okay. Thanks for checking into that. It's good for us to have comparisons and see what other towns are doing, and also really appreciate your feedback on what it's like as essentially the customer or consumer or citizen in this case. So I appreciate that. And by the way, when I was talking to CAL FIRE, and I'm going to bring this back. I'm going to close. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I haven't opened a public comment yet. Are there any public comments? I don't see any public comments. I'm going to bring it back to the Planning Commission. One thing I did want to mention about CAL FIRE was just that as we think about this going forward, we should coordinate with them a little bit, because it's unclear to me. They have something called a less than 3 acre conversion exemption that requires a permit. And so, I assumed that the city's permit process would supersede CAL FIRE's. But one thing we could do for folks is to help them understand the permitting process is to know what permits do they need from City of Trinidad, what do they need from CAL FIRE, and what do they need from Humboldt County, if anything. Because it's unclear to me. When I spoke to CAL FIRE today, they were like, oh no, he needs a permit from us too. So I think we need to look into that, but I'm going to table that for now. And I'm not sure it's the case, but I did want to mention that to the applicant. All right. Other commissioners, how are you feeling about this? Where do we want to go?
My question is, I mean, I feel like the fees that just feels really outrageous. Just my opinion for tree removal. I don't know. Is there moving forward? Obviously, I think it maybe some standardized fees. Tree removal is this. We can. I mean, that's a bigger issue, but I guess I'm kind of curious what we can do within our means for the fee structure on this one.
So on this one, what I've heard,
I mean, I know we can do our exception, right, for the doubling, but is there anything else, or the rest of the stuff we can't touch, Trevor? Is that the case?
So for this one, we can find extenuating circumstances potentially and move to not double the fee. For future, as I think Commissioner Johnson had suggested, we could relook at the after the fact permit policy that we developed a few months back and just make sure that there aren't any holes in it. So for example, I think he suggested defining the extenuating circumstances, and then Commissioner Stockness was suggesting looking at sort of what kind of after the fact permits are being doubled now. Is it everything, or does it not include vegetation? And that's something I think we'd have to discuss and debate a bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess to be more clear, for cutting trees down, this just feels like a ridiculously large amount of a fee, $750. Kind of just like, is that what a standard fee would be, Trevor? Had there not been any back and forth? If this had gone, if the applicant had done crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's from the beginning, because our website was crystal clear and made it extremely obvious, which obviously we have some room to deal with. What would the numbers be coming in at, do you think? I know that's kind of a tough thing to ask.
Yeah, so we haven't had a permit, any kind of permit less than $1,000 in years. Because when it's a public hearing like this, when it's a coastal development permit, there's just, I can't, it doesn't take that long to write the staff report, but there's still, I have to send out notices. I have to create a file. I have to, prepare the packets and make the copies and attend the meeting, so there's just these sort of fixed costs that when it's a public hearing, you can't get around. And,
Okay.
To the larger issue, we've talked about, and the use permit findings they're not adequate for tree removal. Our emergency tree removal process is not adequate. But it's very difficult for us to change our ordinance because everything has to go through the Coastal Commission. And so that's, maybe we could do a small tweak to this. But on the other hand, we're trying to do a complete overhaul of our zoning ordinance, and we're going to fix these things. The administrative permit process. Maybe certain kinds of tree removal could fall under that. We're going to be talking about that in terms of design review for our next item. We've struggled with this for years, and no one is happy with it. But unfortunately, I think for now, it's what we're stuck with.
Okay.
Commissioner Sockness?
So Trevor, when this tree removal permit is requested, does the city engineer have to go and look at it?
No, trees can be removed if they're diseased or pose a hazard with approval of the city engineer. And we've sort of developed kind of a staff administrative process for that, because the city engineer, he's not a tree expert, right, but he's also not comfortable taking on the liability of telling someone no. And so that's another one we've struggled with. So at this point, we require an arborist report to evaluate, that the trees are actually a hazard. And so that has its own costs associated with it,
Okay. So did Mr. Cole have an arborist?
No. I mean,
Okay.
the trees weren't a particular hazard or diseased. The removal was for, defensible space and light access. So they weren't posing a hazard. So that was not required.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson. You're on mute, Richard. That's okay.
Sorry, I know we're a little bit off track, but I think this is very important. And you know, we have to look at ourselves as someone who actually services the public. And I know how frustrating this has been with planning staff for years and years and years. And it's very difficult with the economies of scale that we have in this city, when we really only have one person who is doing much of this work, to cover the costs. And that's a very, very challenging issue. So while I appreciate the fact that Arcata may only charge $200 and some for tree removal, they have a much larger planning department over which they can spread many of their costs. So I suspect that, well, I'm not sure, but I suspect that that's one reason why they can make it so less expensive than us. However, Trevor has brought up another hole in this whole thing, which I think we really need to look at, and that is the emergency permit to remove trees. And I have seen, I think we've all seen cases where there was no arborist report, and the city engineer, as you pointed out, will not take on the liability of saying yay or nay, so they always approve it. And it's my understanding that that can happen in a heartbeat, and there is no cost associated with that. So is that true, Trevor?
That was the case, but like I said, we sort of instituted the staff. It's an unofficial staff policy now. And we've been doing that for probably at least the last 3 years, I would say, where we require some, basically an arborist report to document that they are in fact a hazard.
Yeah, it scares me when you say it's an unofficial policy. So that just strengthens my point that we really need to look at this whole tree removal process holistically and really get it pinned down and make it very simple and straightforward, and for our customers, the residents of the city, and make sure that they understand and communicate to them what their requirements are and what our requirements are.
I agree. And when we get to future agenda items, I've written down, tree removal process and the after the fact permit, kind of revisit that. Would anyone like to make a motion, or does anyone, Commissioner Heikkinen?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion. Based on the information submitted in the application included in the staff report and public testimony, I move to adopt the information and findings in the staff report and approve the project as conditioned therein, with the inclusion that the Planning Commission agrees that there are extenuating circumstances and agrees to waive the doubling of the fee and any penalty fee associated with this permit application.
All right, is there a second?
And so that would be removing condition number 3.
Thank you, Trevor.
Okay, so there's a motion before the commission to approve with the removal of condition number 3.
Second it.
Okay, and I think Diane did as well. All those in, so I'll say Commissioner Johnson seconded because Diane was on mute, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Cole, for your attendance at the meeting and for working through this process with us. And when we have this agendized, we'd welcome you back to give your real life feedback and
thank you.
And keep us on track.
Yeah, no, it's been quite a saga, but thanks for settling it, I suppose. I guess my maybe remaining concern, if I'm allowed, is, I guess it's mostly a question for Trevor, but I mean, obviously the cost is a lot, and you mentioned that I can appeal to the city council for a reduction of that, but my impression is that if I want to appeal that, I probably have to front some kind of a cost to get that agendized, which is like kind of a gamble in and of itself. But is that wrong?
That's a good question. So they didn't double the fee, but so that's what I was thinking could be appealed. Now, the planning commission does include a condition that all costs have to be paid, but that's standard anyway, and I'm not sure we need a condition for that. It might be, I would suggest that, because then, yes, if you appeal, then potentially that adds more costs.
Right.
And I'm, again, these are, so they've waived the fine. And so you would have to request to the council that the city eat the costs of my time on this. And maybe that's justified because the ordinances are lacking. And so it might be, the better option might be to bring it as an item to ask the city council to agendize it. So it's not an appeal, it's not a continuation of this permit, but you make a request to the mayor that they agendize this issue, and as part of that, ask them to consider reducing some of the fees to you. So that's an option. The city council could do that.
Okay. All
All right. Okay. I wish you the best of luck and enjoy your solar. I have solar. It's great. All right. I'm going to move us to agenda item number 2. So this is our general plan update, the community design element and design review. And this is the discussion of the 2018 draft community design element. I just said that, development of objective design standards and streamlined design review procedure. So sorry for repeating myself there. I should have read ahead. So we'll start with staff report when you're ready, Trevor.
Yeah, so, this is just our initial discussion, introduction to a fairly broad topic. And in some sense, maybe it's really 3 topics and we might end up breaking some of this off. So this came from a couple of things. One is, we're trying to continue working on the general plan. We have the planning commission this year has reviewed all the elements that the coastal commission has reviewed, and I'm working on responses. And then the remaining elements, there's noise and public safety. They're combined into one element, but we could, if we wanted to review just noise, we could and get that one done and up to, consistent with the rest of the elements. And that one's not a big coastal commission element. I'm not sure that would even be a part of the LCP. But the public safety element is a big one. That's a big coastal one. And the city has, they're working on the grant contract for an OPC grant to do coastal hazards planning. And so, I'm waiting on that element for that grant to come through. And then the other element that's left will be the cultural resources, which I want to have it before I bring it back to the planning commission. I want to have a chance to, work with UROC and TAS. I have spent some time with Rancheria staff working on that, but probably need to revisit that. It's been a while. So I'd like to work on that draft, with staff and tribal staff before bringing it to the planning commission. So the only other remaining element now for us to continue working on the general plan is community design. So that's one reason for bringing it to you. The other reason is that under our SB2 grant, which originally was supposed to run out at the end of this year, we did get an extra 6 months on that. So that's nice because we weren't actually going to spend all that money. And I can do some more parking counts too if we decide there's some holes. So that was our final task under that grant was to look at sort of streamlining the residential approval process. And I left it pretty broad so that it could be, streamlined permitting procedures like this, some sort of administrative kind of permit that we've talked about before. So that could be part of that, as well as objective design standards, or at least more objective design standards, so that residential projects could potentially be approved ministerially, as opposed to going through a design review process. Now, there probably have to be exceptions to that if user impacted, for example. But so it's sort of three potential topics wrapped into one. So, kind of start with that caveat. So they started to provide an overview and some background information. If you want to focus on one of the three topics as we go along, or if you want to, look at all of them at once as we go through, either way works for me. I have provided you the most recent community design element, which is, I was thinking it was 2018, but it's actually goes back to 2017. So that's in there, and it definitely needs some updates. One of the things I mentioned is it's very policy heavy, yet there's a lot of overlap in the policies, and a lot of subjectivity in them. And so I think it would be good to sort of revisit this and pick out the ones that are most important and try and pare it down a little bit in terms of having fewer policies, but make the ones that are in there more powerful. So I think right now it's sort of a menu, and if you pick out the items that you think are most delicious, that might be a good starting point for working on this. And then I've provided you a little bit of background on objective design standards, as well as a little bit of background information on what a permit waiver or an administrative permit approval process would look like. We did include one in our ADU ordinance, if you recall. I think I guess that was at the last meeting, September meeting. We talked about that because they're still subject to coastal development permits, but they have to be approved ministerially. So we developed that ministerial coastal development permit, which would be, something similar that we could do. The Coastal Commission has a waiver process for small projects. So, because right now someone wants to extend their porch overhang, and it's has to come to the Planning Commission, and those kind of projects really, and it's then you get the same thing where I have to send out notices, I have to write a staff report, I have to do a packet, I have to do, and so it really adds to the cost. And I try and get people, small projects, out of the process as much as I can, but it's pretty limited what I can do there. So that's another thing we've talked about for a long time is having some sort of waiver or administrative permit process. So yeah, I'm happy. Like I said, I know it's a lot of stuff right now. Like I said, I intended this as just sort of an initial discussion, and just see where you want to go next with it.
So I'm going to suggest, I like the way you said this is really shaping up. So good work. First of all, Trevor, thank you. I like the way you set it up to discuss reviewing the design element itself, then brainstorming the objective design standards, and then approvals. And so I think maybe if we parse it out in those three, if everyone is okay with that, that would kind of bracket our discussion a little bit. If there's some overlap, so be it, feel free to talk about other things. But I thought maybe we could start with the design element. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, well, let's start with the design element. So I had just a brief comment on page 1 of the community design element under purpose and background. I just thought for we could probably shorten that up by taking the first sentence of the first paragraph and then deleting the rest of the first paragraph and putting that first sentence at the beginning of the second paragraph, because there's a lot of, it's a couple paragraphs of kind of why aesthetic quality is important in Trinidad. And I think it's summed up very well in that second paragraph. And then the last paragraph on that page could probably go to the Coastal Act section, because it talks about the Coastal Act, and we could just move it over there to simplify. And then on page 2 at the top of the page, I would just remove the sentence at the end of the first paragraph. However, the design review process in Trinidad can be difficult and controversial. I just thought maybe we just keep that, it's not really a general plan comment, it's more of an editorial comment, which is very true, but anyway, so let's see. I think we could probably also take out the last paragraph on page 2. It's also kind of more background. And then getting into the meat, it did seem, I agree with you, Trevor, there's a lot here. There's a lot of policy information. And so I think we might be able to combine the scenic view policies with possibly with, let's see, it was 1.4. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. All right, I'm going to hold that thought because I've lost my thread here on what I was going to combine, but I think it was CD 1.1 with 1.2 or 1.4. It seemed like there was some redundancy, but anyway. And then I'm going to hold. I had a few other comments, but I'm going to hold on those. Okay, commissioners, other folks who want to chime in?
I just had a starting question in the design element. When it makes references, Arcata, Menifee, Trinidad, Palmdale. Help me. Can I get some context behind that? Because as I was, reviewing this, I don't have any for that. So.
Yeah, so that's where those policies came from those general plans. And so I think that's what jogged my memory. I think what I did is when I was drafting this, I just pulled in a bunch of sample policies from a bunch of general plans that I thought could be applicable to Trinidad. And then we never went through and kind of pulled out the ones that we don't need or, edit them. So it's still left with, sort of these policies from other jurisdictions that were intended to be, like I said, sort of that menu of policies to consider, not necessarily that they should all be included.
Okay. A question on the view corridors. Do we have those defined within town? Have we just said the whole town is one? Or I know there was an example later, and that was a really good one. They described the corridor versus, I think, view site, or, the cone versus I liked that. But
yes.
That could be a pretty controversial list to develop.
Yeah. And we have talked about that. We have, are there scenic areas of town? Are there view corridors? But we have never decided on any.
Okay.
We've talked about, well, should east of the freeway not even be subject to design review? But then there's sometimes, I guess, then they're just on the wrong side of the tracks. But we did, the views and vegetation ordinance, we did develop some of these ideas a little bit further. And I provided you the criteria in there where it starts to get at, it's not just about the view being blocked, but the quality of the view, the percentage of the view, where, from where is the view, where are you viewing it? Are you viewing it from your kitchen window, your living room, your bathroom, whatever. And that also narrowed down an area of the city that's more view sensitive, so that map could be used as a guideline for where the view areas in the city are. But no, at this point, we do not have any designated scenic areas or view corridors.
Okay, thanks. Along that same vein, the bottom of page 6, we talk about development and preservation of unique communities and neighborhoods in which each neighborhood exhibits do we really have a sense of individual neighborhoods in Trinidad? I'm still relatively new to town, so that, I don't know, just felt like it didn't make sense, or was it trying to define something different?
I don't think there is. We did. There have been sort of some informal architectural surveys done, but I don't think there's a cohesive, maybe, sort of in the upper part of town, that your part of town, Aaron, it's maybe a little more cohesive, where there's smaller, older houses. A lot of those are from the 40s and 50s, but no, I don't think that there's any.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I just thought if we don't think that exists, then, striking that whole kind of that section. That's all for now, I guess, for me.
All right, thank you. And I just found the other thing I was going to mention, sorry, on page 9, the green building and landscaping. I guess my thought was that those should maybe go to the land use element, that we would find most of that in the land use element, but I'm not sure. So, Commissioner Johnson, I noticed you came off mute. Did you want to, and Commissioner Hopkins, either of you want to comment? Feel free.
Sure, I'll go. I don't know if this is the time or not, but it seems like you're kind of wanting to do two things here by not having objective design review, but yet keep the city looking quaint and nice. And so I think that word is strange. That, I mean, we want to keep Trinidad nice. And one thing that I thought about was like maybe having some kind of nautical reference for each house, or something, like, do something that makes it look like the ocean, a round window or a whatever, a chain or something, or just something fun. So anyway, that jumped out at me. I know in 2010, I believe there used to be design awards for the best design of the year. I don't know how that played out, but these are just things jumping out. Oh, and real quick, why can't cost be the basis? Say cost and view of a permit being a ministerial versus non-ministerial.
That could potentially be one way to break it down.
Great, thanks.
Richard, did you have some things?
Oh, just a couple of comments. First of all, I tend to agree with what you said, Cheryl. There's a lot of redundancy here, I think, that we could take out. And I think that would streamline a little bit better, make it a little bit more cohesive. The one thing that was a little, I was a little questioning, though, Trevor, was that there's no reference to anything related to SB 35. And my concern there is that when you look at where we are in our build out, our total build out, and we look at what SB 35 is asking us to do, a lot of these ADUs are going to be somewhat of the same architectural design as the primary residence. And of course, this goes to the ministerial approval of them. And it may be that there's even a bigger thing that we can do in terms of streamlining some of these design, community design issues based on proximity to other buildings and also to the primary residence or other structures on the property. Because if we will, I'm sure that we'll have exceptions, and that's okay, because we have a requirement that exceptions can be taken through a typical design review process. But I was just a little concerned, and I don't know to what extent. I'm not exactly sure to what extent SB 35 is going to hit us, but I just thought that was somewhat important. Just a couple of other comments. on page 4, CD 1-5, 1.5, and CD 1.6. My concern here is that we talk about trees, and which is fine, but we talk about it in the context of landscaping. And it seemed to me that we really should be talking about trees and vegetation at the same time. The point being is that when you trim trees, you also very often trim vegetation. And so to me, I think we could streamline this a little bit by saying trees/vegetation and look at both in the same way, and maybe would make it a little bit easier, because we're pruning not only trees, but we prune a lot of vegetation as well. The other thing is that there's nothing really in here about existing trees. And we talk about landscaping for new, we talk about new trees and where they should be planted and that they don't block certain coastal views, et cetera. Excuse me. But I think we also need to address existing trees as well. And then another comment was, and you did mention it, I think earlier, Trevor, and we need somehow or another to incorporate the TMP. I know we have that as a future agenda item, but I think it's going to be very important when we talk about particularly vegetation management plans and views. One of the issues, of course, is how does the TMP integrate with coastal views? And that's a big deal. And, there's a lot of opinions on how that should be handled. Let me just real quick go through and hit some of the high spots. Oh, yeah, one more thing. On page 9, under green buildings, and I'm not exactly sure this is where it needs to be, but somewhere, somehow, maybe it is land use, maybe it is here. I think we need to talk about the city developing incentives for some of this. And what I mean by that is, we talk about green buildings, we talk about LEDs, LEEDs, we talk about low impact development, but the city needs, I think, to step up and help incentivize residents to make that happen, or help them at least. So somewhere it would be nice to have a policy regarding that, wherever it might go. Oh, and I, in terms of streamlining this document, I looked at, and I could be wrong, and maybe it's a bigger deal than it needs to be, but public art and open space and other community design issues, especially when it comes to public art and open space. That could be something that is like a declaration or a proclamation from the city council. I don't feel that it necessarily needs to be in the general plan, but then that's just my maybe lack of artistic acumen. But nevertheless, if we were looking for ways to cut this down, those would be 2 items that I think we could probably look at maybe removing. So those are just some general comments for first go around.
Thank you. And for what it's worth, I agree about the public art and open space. It's really nice, but maybe doesn't need to be in the general plan. And just as a footnote to the trees and vegetation, I just wanted to mention that Humboldt County defines major vegetation. Trees are major vegetation. So you could have, vegetation, trees, major vegetation, and just be sure that under major vegetation, you define it. You say, this is where trees live, so to speak, unless they're removed. No, just kidding. Commissioner Stockness.
Okay, so first of all, the SB 2 grant. Trevor, how long do we have for that money
Till June,
of next year?
22, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down. June 2022. And, you know, I'm a little slow. So Richard, or Trevor, what is SB 35? Is that the ADU thing?
It's the, and I mean, the state is really
Is
trying
that
to
the housing thing?
push housing. Yeah. So
Okay.
every year there's a whole new suite of bills. So
Okay.
it's, but SB 35, at least at this point, does not apply in the coastal zone. So we are immune from it for now. It specifically says in there. So it's basically for cities who have not met their housing goals, they have to streamline multifamily development. But it specifically states it does not apply in the coastal zone.
Okay, so
Thank you. I had forgotten that, Trevor. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I read that today. Thank you.
so, you know, I like SB or 8.16, the determining unreasonable obstruction of views. And then you said you're doing administrative permits and permit waivers, right?
Well, we haven't done that yet. We
But
did.
we're gonna work on that. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that one yet, Diane.
Okay,
We're
so,
still looking at the element and trying
right, all
to.
right. It was at the beginning of my notes. Okay, so, you know, I'm just like real concerned with the scenic view policy. And I did get, you know, the views and vegetation ordinance today from Anton, because I wanted to go over all those, and I think we need to go over that. And just like Richard brought up 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 with the trees and the management of vegetation, because it's affecting the views. And I can personally tell you that over 45 years, it's gotten out of hand. Okay, so now the landscaping policies need to stay, I feel, need to stay in this element and not go to land use, because we need to talk about what people are putting in and what the height is of trees, existing trees, native plants. So I'd like to see the landscaping stay in that element, in that the CD, and I guess I'm talking about CD 7.1 and 7.2. And then in 7.3, oh no, I want to go back to 7.2. No, it wasn't that one. Let's see. Anyway, it was about, it is. Oh no, it's farther up. Okay. So 7.3, require property owners to maintain the landscaping on developed sites such that it does not present any unreasonable view obstructions consistent with the city's views and vegetation ordinance. So what we've got going around town is it's in the parking, the vegetation and landscaping of several properties. It's out in the parking area or it's on the road. So that needs to be, you know, required. And then it goes on with maintain Trinidad's beauty and character, CD 9.2. ensure that properties are well maintained and nuisances are abated, and the nuisances are not abated. And it might be overgrown, vegetation, trees, branches. And then I had somebody call me today and said it's cars. There are cars out there in the landscape, abandoned cars, and they want those dealt with. And then also maintaining the beauty and character. We could, add something about fire defensive space. Okay, and then 9.2.2, consider adopting regulations in the municipal code requiring that alleyways in residential areas be kept free of obstructions to ensure unimpeded access at all times. So I'm thinking of ADUs being constructed and then just visitor parking. Some of it is daily, some of it's more than that. And then this is kind of a touchy one, okay? So CD 9.4. The Shoreside Village, the cemetery, the Holy Trinity Church, and the Memorial Lighthouse are important resources. So public, it says, let's see, defined in the general plan, they're defined in the plan, the Trinidad general plan, or within 100 feet of the lots on which identified historical resources are located, shall be reviewed to ensure public views are not obstructed and that development does not crowd them and thereby reduce their distinctiveness or subject them to abuse or hazards. Okay, so the bluff, which is part of the Shoreside Village site, is abused. It has a hazard because the area, the bumper wall along the bluff and the street is broken down in several spots. So I've mentioned that to the city. And so I just feel that because the Shoreside doesn't maintain the site, like they don't do any pruning of trees. They did a little bit on some bushes, which are major landscape now, I guess. But that needs to be looked at because it is a hazard. It is obstructing public views because everybody that comes to town parks on the bluff, whether they're going down the Lindgren Trail or they're just sitting and having their lunch on the bench. So that was, I know they're important in the history, but they do need to be taken care of. And so they're not a hazard and they're not blocking public views. I think that's it for right now.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Heikkinen.
Sorry, I had three more things I found in my notes here. And one comment on Diane's about CD 9.2.2, the alleyway parking. I have concern over us getting too into the weeds on regulating that area. We do have many long-term residents in this town that are members of our community, and they access their properties that way and park there. So I'm not saying we don't want to regulate it, but as we get into that, be aware that is some additional parking that's available in our town that's already in short supply, and we would need to very carefully define that so we don't, mean that people that have that as the primary access to their unit they live in have to now park elsewhere.
What I was saying, Aaron, was the vegetation that comes out into the alleys. I'm not against the people parking there. It's just some of the vegetation is coming out of the back into the alley.
You. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Maybe
I'll
we
limit
say
my
something
apple
like
tree
keeping the alleyways clear or something.
Right.
Like that,
of vegetation to ensure. Okay. So CD 7.3 on page 10, Trevor, I just had a comment on that. Isn't that kind of inherently covered by the view vegetation of the municipal code 8.6? Could that be struck entirely? Are we duplicating and setting ourselves up to have it in two different places where we forget to update it in one and then the other?
Which one did you mention?
CD 7.3 at the top there, we reference consistent with the views and vegetation ordinance. Well, isn't that already done in 8.6? So why is it even here? To me, that just opens up an opportunity for us to update it in 8.6 someday and forget to change, you know what I mean? And I don't know. Just felt like
I think there's a lot of policies in here that say we're going to do things, and that's really, we need to get away from that and actually
do
those things.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, that's one of the things that so based on this initial feedback, I'm gonna go do a pretty significant overhaul of this. You know, I didn't want to do my edits before I gave it to you.
Sure.
I thought I'd give you what we had. But yeah, this really isn't consistent with our more recent elements. And that's one of the reasons, is because it calls for doing a lot of stuff. But yeah, why
are we calling it out again? It's kind of already.
Yeah, I think.
And there may be an advantage to that because it's an awful lot of different sections to go through if you're trying to figure something out. And so.
I mean, and I'm not sure we have it anywhere else in the general plan, but this is worded strangely. I mean, I think it's continue to ensure that it's just worded strangely, because if there's already an ordinance, then a policy doesn't do anything for you.
Right. Page 7 is another one, CD 4.1. We've got just a comment on limiting the overall proliferation of signage, scenic views. Seems like that should be in section CD 1. That's related to view issues more than signage issues. And then a greater question, I don't know if it's for this body or who, but when it comes to CD 4.3, a single design theme, we don't have that. And that's on the Trails Committee, that comes up from time and time again. There just isn't anything consistent in town. Whose purview is that under? Is that ours? Is the Planning Commission? Or could it be? Is it under the City Council? Is it? Because I think there's an opportunity to have some, for lack of a better word, themed, signage throughout town and pick up the design and go with it. And I don't know if there's grant funding that can help with that, because obviously there's a cost involved with designing that. But I don't know where that responsibility lies, but that's something I think I'd like to see as a future agenda item if it is ours. Not that I want to add anything.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely within the purview of this ordinance. And there are signs or something that when you change the regulations, they're commonly amortized, which is basically you get to keep them for however many years, which then you get your investment back. And then you can require them to be upgraded. So that might be something you could do. However, we've had trouble with enforcing sign rules. Now, I don't know. I know there was an effort a few years ago to do an inventory and all the signs that were in violation, particularly like the two sort of billboards on the bluff. Those are totally illegal signs. I mean, they were put in a long time ago, but they now no longer conform, and it's 40 years past the 3 years that they got. But it is, business owners do not want to remove their signs.
Sure. It seems to me that part of the challenge with any kind of enforcement or accountability or consistency is that we don't space out or spell out objectively. I'm just looking at CD 4.82, ensure that sign data are compatible with the surrounding area. What the heck does that mean?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Is there anything that says no sign shall be greater than X by Y anywhere in our municipal code? I haven't researched that.
There are, yes. So there is a maximum size for signs. I think there's probably a maximum height. And there is a maximum total square footage that you can have on your property.
And
But-
to that, sorry, just to that point, here we're talking about a piece of signage here, but then elsewhere in our Muni code, there's, it's like, where does one person go to ensure that they're being compliant or within the guidelines? It just doesn't seem easy.
No, although, really people should be going to the ordinances because the ordinances are supposed to implement these policies that are supposed to be more general.
Okay.
I think
But they can still be more objective in and of themselves too. And someone brought up the design awards, and it was only done for a couple of years, I think, but the city council gave an award for best sign to an illegally built sign. So just Trinidad.
So I want to let Commissioner Heikkinen finish his comments, but I did want to just interject that I think when we talk about design standards, depending on how we define those, that could include signage. But I would think that it would need to be a process to gather the right people together and get some input. So from the Chamber of Commerce, for example, and that kind of thing, so that the business owners can have some input and so forth, because it would have to be very collaborative, I think, because signs are just quite the controversial topic in town. So it's a tough one. Nobody seems to necessarily want to tackle it. At one point, I proposed that the Planning Commission could take on a quote unquote signage master plan. And I had outlined it and sent it to a few folks, including I think the mayor, but I didn't hear back. So I don't think it was something that anybody wanted to jump right on. But that doesn't mean we're going to be deterred.
Right. That's all I've got. Thanks, Cheryl.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Stockness?
So, Trevor, how many signs can a party put up to advertise something?
It depends on the zone. It depends on the circumstances. In the commercial zone, I think it's a square foot for every foot of lot street frontage you have or something like that. Up to 300 square feet is the max, something like that. I could pull it up if you're interested.
I just was kind of flabbergasted by all the adopted child, the little green signs that are all over town, especially when you come in past the school. They're all over the place. And I didn't know, wow, I just thought, one sign or two signs, but there are 10.
What are those?
Well, Aaron, do you know exactly what they are?
I think you might be referring to the CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocate.
Yeah.
They're recruiting heavily for folks to kind of reach out to those kids in need. And I think that's just, kind of like a breast cancer awareness sign people can put up. I think people just get them and put them out there.
I did ask Gabe and he said, he gave him the okay. But I'd never seen that many signs in town advertising one thing. So I was just curious since we were talking about signs. And what did you say it was, Aaron? The CASA?
I believe, the Court-Appointed Special Advocate is what I'm guessing those are.
So if you look at 17.56.160, that's the sign regulations in the zoning ordinance. That was 17.56.160. So you can have, that might fall under, the temporary signs.
I'm sure it's temporary, but I was
signs.
Curious. Thank you.
So you can do that in all zones.
All right, let's talk about design standards. And the only kind of overriding thought I had at the outset was I didn't feel like necessarily I was the person who would have the expertise to set design standards. And then it made me question whether or not we should have architectural advice In other words, outsource it a little bit. It's just a thought, but someone who, like when you start getting into how big should the porch edifice be? I don't even know if that's a thing, but, I don't know, and maybe some of you do. And if we have expertise on the planning commission that can do that sort of thing, then maybe we're in great shape. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out before we, as a more general comment. And with that, does anyone want to share their expertise?
Well, I'm no expert and don't claim to be. And my only comment in reading through, for example, Gilroy and Windsor, I think were the two that, well, Gilroy's most comprehensive. That I wouldn't have any idea whether or not these are good or bad or indifferent. I think that essentially, I like the idea of having very objective design standards, but why would someone say that they can't use artificial stone on the front of a building facade? That to me is just editorial comment, but I think that's overkill. And but maybe that's where you have to go to get the objectivity that we're looking for. But this is pretty comprehensive, and to me, it just started to become so complicated for a very small community to try to implement that I just get worried that we'll get bogged down in the minutia of trying to develop objective design reviews to this degree of detail. I think if we can keep it to a little bit higher level, I think we can probably get by with it, but this is so comprehensive that it's just impossible.
I think, I think, we don't care what kind of window treatments or siding or how big their eaves are, or, a lot of those things, I don't think Trinidad cares about. I think it's, sort of the overall scale and bulk of something, and views are really the two primary issues. Other than that, I'm not sure, again, window to wall ratio or porch to wall ratio. Do you have to have things stepped? We can say, yes, things should be varied, roof heights or, wall, there's a couple of houses that are just big boxes in Trinidad and they weren't real popular when they went in. So you could try and discourage that. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure we're going to ever get to strictly objective design standards, but we want to have something more objective than what we have now and avoid some of these really contentious, difficult meetings we've had. And usually that's to do with views, honestly.
Well, and just to follow up real quickly, and my concern would be that we put into place what we believe are the right set of effective design reviews, which I think we could do. But there's always going to be exceptions to the case, which are always going to throw it right back into a public design review process, which leaves us in the same, leaves us with the same dilemma that we faced before. So I think, I guess it's just a cautionary comment that I don't think that spending a lot of time trying to develop detailed objective design reviews in the long run is going to do much for us. So my comment.
Thanks for the feedback. Commissioner Hopkins, I think you had your hand up, and then Commissioner Softness.
I just wanted to think, I think that we can, just by keeping it more simple, we'll get a better end product. Like by just do it in a good way and make it better. And when you see a good set of plans or in a 3D in a model, it jumps out at you what looks goofy and what doesn't. It really does. And so that's how I'm just trying to make it better. Yeah, a lot of this stuff you just get lost in the weeds, and Trinidad's already kind of built out. I am concerned about the solar gain though. I don't know where that would be, but as we're going to be building up more in the future, I think that should be addressed somewhere. Thank you.
Commissioner Softness, you had something to add too?
So, we're not Windsor and we're not Gilroy. We're a coastal community. And so I think we can do, the simple designs. We do have to watch the vegetation growth and the views. And that's my main area, is that's what's taking over. And to talk to Tom, I think people are going to start doing some panels, solar, in the city. So I think that'll add to it. But like Richard said, we're not going to really care if somebody puts, fake rock in front and maybe a little bit of brick or whatever. But the main thing is we have to keep the streets clear of vegetation and big trees, because we only have 12 streets and only one street with a line in the middle. So that we need to think about exactly how small we are when we look at different designs. Okay.
So I just had, go ahead, Commissioner Heikkinen.
Or you can go first. Doesn't matter to me, Cheryl. Please.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
So kind of to Tom's point, I jotted down just the percentage of build out we have, how significant a problem is this for us to solve? And I appreciate it. There have been lots of contentious previous ones that I haven't been a party to, so I have no slide in my tray when it comes to that. But maybe a different approach to these design criteria, instead of trying to get specific and in the weeds, draft something that's more design guiding principles or concepts for the city of Trinidad that talk about, in keeping with existing architectural styles that are existing in this community and the bulk, and we can kind of speak to that in more general sense. And then add to that as people are proposing things, that we highly encourage and recommend that they bring it before the Planning Commission in just an informational step at a preliminary phase to just kind of show us what you're thinking of. And it opens it up to the community ahead of time. It opens it up to us to go, this is great. As a commissioner, have a concern about this. Before they invest all these hours and times with their architects and want to come back and say, that roof line's too high, you need to rework everything. And it changes all the other, because I think that's kind of how they do it with a client. I've never built a home from scratch. I know some of you have and might have more experience with that, but I would imagine there's a kind of more of a concept drawing that comes first. And then you go on from there. I've designed fire stations and things like that with work. I've helped with that. And that's how we've done that. So I don't know if that would be a better approach for us to just have kind of like guiding principles and statements of our design. Which are yes gray and yes open and yes vague, but might help push folks, kind of to Tom's point, to do the right thing and to make it better.
Yeah, so I think you're kind of that's kind of the direction I was going to head into, Aaron. As I was looking at page 2 of the Windsor document, where they talk about the development standards and guidelines, and so the standards were the objective criteria, and the guidelines were the subjective. And so if we did, had a set of guidelines, as you described, for kind of the things that are more variable and we're going to have a really hard time narrowing down. And then on the standard side, I could see some things that are objective where we say, things that we have today, like the height and the setbacks and the septic and the, those kinds of things. Well, septic probably not in there, but those kind of things, the height and setbacks and ratios, we might be able to use some ratios. And maybe the standards could apply more frequently to things like, patios and decks and those seem to come up a lot, like especially decks. I think it seems like we've had a number of decks, and you do get to the point where you're like, unless there's a view shed concern, and if it's only expanding it by, let's say, less than 40% or something, maybe that's administrative, right, or ministerial. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know if I'm going to finish this work that I started today, but one of the things I did is I started looking at, for the last 10 years, what are all the things that have come to the Planning Commission, and I started putting it in a spreadsheet by type, so that we could see, like, what are the things that we're really spending time on besides the general plan, but permit approvals and after the fact permits and so forth, and for what types of projects. And then we can kind of say, oh wow, out of the 50 things that came to the Planning Commission, 30 of them were decks, and then we can say, oh, well, that could be low-hanging fruit, to free up some of our time and staff time to, work on the general plan and things like that. Anyway, so I started doing that today. I got through 2013 and 2012, I think. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. It goes fairly fast, but I'll try to finish that, in the next month or so. Anyway, other comments about standards and objectives? Richard, you were about to say something?
Well, I was saying, I think that's something worth pursuing. My only comment to it would be that, well, of course, we can't predict what the future will be. And the only reason I say that is that a lot of the properties in Trinidad, as much as we may or may not like it, are very valuable to people, and they want to come in, and they may be changing them much more so than we have seen in the past. So it could be that the past issues that we have dealt with will help us in maybe coming up with design review standards. But I think that there's going to be a different group of things that we're going to be dealing with in the future.
Oh, okay. Wouldn't be surprised.
McMansions versus not McMansions, right. I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, I could see people pushing on developing, adding, making their houses larger, and definitely.
I was going to say it seems like Trinidad is built out, but there are a surprising number of parcels. It's something in like the 30 to 40 developable parcels left in Trinidad. A lot of them are up on Berry Road. And there are some on Scenic Drive, some of which may not be developable. But yeah, there are actually a surprising number left, but I think like what Richard just mentioned, I keep waiting for, again, that sort of upper older part of town. People are going to want to start building up, I think, on those. And so that, they want to build up and get a view, and then you start to have view issues in that part of town that maybe doesn't necessarily have view issues now.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and open to public comments real quick, and then we can finish up. Are there any public comments regarding the general plan element? All right, seeing none, I'll bring this back to the Planning Commission. I just wanted to check and make sure that we weren't missing anybody, because all right, so the next thing would be discussing the approvals, administrative, ministerial, that kind of thing. My sense is that we need to nail down a little bit more on item 1 and 2, but let me ask you guys what you think. And
I guess my feeling is, Trevor, I appreciate what Trevor said earlier, that she didn't want to get too far into this document, or to the two documents, two sections, if you will, until we had some dialogue on it. I think that's a good idea. I think the approvals I'm not as concerned with at this point. I think that I'd like to see another version of the first two first, and then move on if that's a plan that would work for you, Trevor. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that could work. But I also, I'm thinking, proceed, what types of how do we want to categorize projects? Someone mentioned cost, that might be one way. Size, are you adding more than 10% in some direction or another? It could be the type of project. Are you going up? Are you going out? Is it a deck? Is it a porch? So yeah, how to categorize, because I think that's how we're going to have to do it, is sort of categorize projects. But then how do you deal with maybe some of the borderline ones? So most decks you don't review, but a second story deck could impact somebody's view.
Right.
So how do you, but I can't determine that. I can't go stand on the neighbor's deck or living room and see that their view is going to be impacted. So, is there sort of an interim? So that's also a procedural question. And we don't have to answer these tonight. It's probably helpful maybe if I threw out some more specific ideas for you. Again, I sort of just wanted to start the conversation and start, like Richard said, getting a dialogue going and start to hear your feedback. And I'm getting a lot more ideas just from this discussion. All these topics really overlap. I don't know that necessarily one has to come before the other. But yeah, so it might be helpful if I sort of start to, provide some ideas or breakdowns for ways to sort of categorize and differentiate projects. And then, yeah, like I was just saying, there might be a process too where, maybe you still send out notices. So maybe instead of a permit waiver, it's more like maybe instead of an administrative permit for some things, maybe there's more of a permit waiver, like the Coastal Commission does, where you still send out notices to neighbors. They still have to complete a full application. And then, either myself or the Planning Commission just approves it if there's no, objections. It's a quicker process somehow. So it doesn't have all the steps, but some of the steps, so we can make sure, someone's view isn't being impacted. So there's a lot of ways to kind of come at it. So yeah, I don't think we need to go too far down that road tonight. But if anybody has any ideas or suggestions, I'm happy to.
I think, open it up to the commissioners. The only thing I would say is just piggybacking on what you guys were just talking about is the project scope. So scope usually implies a cost, and a bigger scope project usually has a higher price. But if we could think about the scope of the projects and the impact of the projects, there may be some low-hanging fruit for administrative approval with an appeals process to the Planning Commission or something like that. Anyway, Commissioner Heikkinen and then Commissioner Stockton, if you guys had your hands up.
Yeah, Trevor, I'm just curious. You could probably off the top of your head, just shout out a list of 20 different project types that are that you could see before you. Are you able to capture that on a list and maybe get that out to us ahead of the next meeting, so that we can kind of begin to think about how we feel about those? This one, no, hard no or hard yes for absolutely administrative, or what concerns does it trigger a view? That kind of stuff. Just give us.
Yeah, well, and that what Cheryl's putting together might give that to you, because that's the ones we've actually reviewed. And everything from.
That'd be a great starting point. Yeah.
A couple of second story decks, the balconies on Mike Ryman's apartments, those are very small projects. Somebody had to do they went from a flat roof to a peaked roof. Now that could impact somebody's views, but it's also, I don't think anybody should be stuck with a flat roof in Trinidad.
Thank you.
So that might be, what Cheryl's putting together might kind of give you that. And then maybe I can add some other ideas and examples of other.
Yeah, I was going to say, you should look at it, Trevor, because even as I was typing, putting things in, I thought, I bet Trevor knows the history behind this one or whatever that has more insight. Because sometimes the notes, like for example, I didn't know whether something got approved or not. And I figured at some point somebody's going to ask, did that get approved? And, we don't necessarily, I don't necessarily know. Anyway, but I'll pass it by you and then we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah.
Cell towers and Chevron signs.
Oh, gosh.
So Cheryl,
Some of my
Yes.
favorites.
have you
Commissioner
been,
Stockness.
were there a couple of roof projects that you were looking at in 2012 and 2013?
A couple of what?
Roof projects.
Oh, the ones that I had, I may even have the spreadsheet up. It seemed like they were a lot of remodel and expansion, I would say. So, and then some city projects, some rancheria projects, vegetation on Trinidad Head, that kind of thing. Road work, a few road work things, so we get a lot of those. But yeah, a lot of remodel and expansion. So where somebody says, oh, I have a X, footprint house, 1,000, let's say I have 1,400 square feet, I want to add 2,000 to it. And I have an outbuilding and I want to, make it 1,500 square feet, that kind of thing.
So Trevor, is a roof permit separate from the remodel or extension permit?
So I think that's a great example of how complicated this can get. So
Yeah, because people haven't gotten the permits for the roofs.
Well, that was so the roof, the pitch change that came to the Planning Commission. But then there's things like metal roofs. So we've had a couple of inquiries for metal roofs, and so I actually looked into this and looked at some of the past history. And so because I think it was there's a place that's visible from like Old Home Beach and the Bluff that has a bright blue metal roof. And I think the city got a lot of complaints after that went in. And so what I've done is there's an exemption if something changes the appearance or profile of a structure. So a metal roof doesn't change the profile, but it can change the appearance. So for example, there's the sort of maroon metal roof at the corner of Galindo and Van Wyck. And that came to the Planning Commission because it was a substantial change from the kind of roof they had. But then there was another one where they were going from brown shingles to brown metal roof. And I said, well, it doesn't really change the appearance as long as it's not shiny. And so that gets complicated. Some the people at on the one house that's on the seaward side of Van Wyck, they just asked if they could paint their roof with white rubber paint. And I thought, no one wants to look down on a white roof.
Well, at least they asked, because I've seen a couple places that didn't have permits, so I brought it up to Gabe. And I said,
re-roofing does require a building permit, so they should at least have a building permit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it gets complicated because metal
And
roofs
then there was
allow
one
for
more
water catchment, so it's a good thing. If the colors, Anyway, Go ahead, Diane.
There was one more about the draft in 2002 for the for the design structures and setbacks and view protection. I got that from Anton today, so I don't know if we should all read that part too, the draft from April of 2002.
You want to send that to me or have Anton? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Okay, well, it's the minutes of the April 8th, 2002
Oh.
meeting.
I
And
think I
that,
do remember that.
and then
What-
you signed it, Trevor. But
Yeah, no, I do remember that now, I think, yeah.
there, it's written pretty well. A lot of it is was in the 2017, which you gave us. But, I just wanted to bring that up to see if we should probably read that. I'm going to read it better just to see.
So
if-
that was the draft element as of 2002 that you guys are talking
Right.
about?
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Well, I think it might have been a more general discussion about design issues in Trinidad.
Yeah, it
And I
said
think
planning commission discussion, like kind of
Yeah.
like what we're having today.
And I think what came out of that was the views and vegetation ordinance out of that
Okay.
discussion.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just read it better. And I just wanted to tell you that I got that from Anton today. And I think he's doing a really good job. So Anton, thank you very much for your good work.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to, unless there are any parting comments on this, I'm going to go ahead and call it done for now, and we'll come back. Okay. So we're commissioner reports. Are there any reports from standing committees? I see head shaking no. I have none. All right. Then Trevor, it's right back to you with the staff report.
Let's see. I have the decommissioning of the Verizon site should be coming to you next month. So they plan to have their 2 new towers online by the end of the year, and they want to be ready to decommission once those are online. And then I think the only other outstanding applications I've got are the 2 rezones, which they're probably both getting close. I might process them both together. I'm going to start those require tribal consultation under SB 18. So I'm going to go ahead and send out those notices, start that process. But it's still going to take a while, but you might see those in maybe December. I just got the ADU ordinance kind of amended based on our last discussion. And I also, the Coastal Commission approved Mendocino County. So I incorporated a few of the recommendations from that approval and sent that off to the Coastal Commission for comment today. Oh, I did want to respond. So for Richard, the OWTS, that's just one of those things that staff has not had time to fully implement. And it's one of those things that just keeps getting set aside. So I don't know if the city has even sent out letters to every property in the city to say they need to comply. Basically what we've been doing the last few years is catching them with property sales and with permit applications. So we're not just going out and trying to get people to renew or submit applications, because we just don't have the staff to process those permits. People submit their material and then it sits on my file cabinet. I do have someone in my office that's interested in working on that, but it's something that we all kind of have to be back working in the office, I think, to be able to hand that off. I can't really hand that off remotely, I don't think. So yeah, no, it's been a priority. The council probably brings it up once a year. And I think most of the real estate agents know that they have to do that and get their permit as part of a sale, but some have fallen through the cracks. Either they're realtors that don't know Trinidad, or like there's been a couple that recently the Collins's places were sold by owners, so they didn't come under that property transfer. But I did recently talk to Ross Nash, the building inspector, about making sure they are reviewed also as part of just building permits, even if not, no planning's required. So we're just slowly trying to bring those in as we can. And hopefully, and now that Gabe has more help, the city hired a couple of new people. The woman before Angela, Nicole, she was really getting going on that. And we had a lot of momentum, and we're about to really, we had a whole system ready where she could draft the permits, and we had letters ready, and we were going to implement that with her, and then she left. So maybe that's something one of the new staff people could do as well. So yeah, hopefully in the next year we'll get that better implemented. I think that's probably all I have to report at this point.
Right, thank you. Diane, did you have a question? You're on mute, Diane. Oh, there you go.
I have a report. Okay, so
okay.
I forgot, but it was so tiny, it was so small. The STR committee met on October 5th. And one of the members wasn't there. We still need another member from the community because we have one community member and one STR owner that was there. The other STR owner wasn't there. So Eli, gave us a report. We didn't have any complaints, STR complaints. And so far, the city has received $129,936 from STRs for the TOT tax. And then the committee doesn't really want to meet a lot because they think, they're glad that everybody worked on the STR ordinance. The council is supposed to look at it in November. They still haven't looked at it because of this whole water issue. But they don't really think we need to meet a lot because of, everything seems to be going fine. But we will meet in January with the city council and Eli, because we always have a joint meeting, but the meeting for December, which is like the fourth Tuesday, is like Christmas week. So they've decided I think it's going to be the 28th now of 2022. That will be the next STR meeting. And if we can get a community member, that would be good. So that's all. I kind of spaced out on that.
No worries. Thank you.
All right.
All right. So future agenda items, I think we already talked about tree removal and maybe looking at the ATF permit charges to see if they're appropriate for smaller infractions, I guess I'd call them, versus the bigger infractions. Is there anything else, Commissioner Hopkins?
Yeah, I don't know what happened with the paperwork this month, but this is the second time that it's ended up somewhere else, and I've got it from a friend, literally. I don't know if it's if the
you mean the packet for the planning commission?
Yeah.
It blew away in the windstorm.
Oh, is that it?
Anton said, and I couldn't pick mine up. I was out of town, but I guess the beachcomber brought it back to Anton and Gabe, and they had to redo it because it was wet.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
So that's
correct.
what happened this time. Tom, has that happened before though, or is this the first time?
There was a packet found at the beach with my name on it.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So they didn't read your note, Trevor.
Yeah, there's a note.
Or it was before I started putting the notes on it, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, just thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, no, that's good to
if
know.
anybody has any ideas for a better system,
Is the box back up
Lock
outside, or can we
box.
get like a mailbox type of thing that we can just put them in instead of? I know when the solar got installed, things got moved around. They used to be in the glass case. Then we had the cardboard box, which obviously now that it's winter is no longer robust enough. I hate to clutter the entryway there, but
Yeah, maybe we need a mailbox.
Yeah, I mean, I used to deliver them, but that was, it's harder when some are outside city limits. That gets to be
Yeah.
difficult.
In that glass box worked great. It's kind of a small deterrent.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, let's. I'll talk to Gabe, and if anybody has any ideas, let us know. I mean, maybe there
Yeah.
could be some sort of lockbox, and all of you have a key to it, that you can come pick it up or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, I'd hate to have to do that, but it is a problem if people are walking off with them. And I got there early, so I got mine. But there are many times that I think, well, I might as well just grab them and bring them to you guys.
Yeah.
So I can always volunteer to do that once in a while. All right. Anything else? Any other questions or concerns, Diane?
Tomorrow is the great shakeout at 10 something, for earthquakes, and we still don't have the tsunami.
Right.
But Dengler's always giving us good information in the newspaper about earthquakes and what we need to do. But I just thought I'd bring that up because I'm going to be under my table at 10, whatever it is, 14 or whatever. It should be on the TV maybe in the morning that would say that.
Oh, okay. Good to know. All right. I think with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.